Hello everyone. Thank you so much to Professor Sylvia Viet from Germany to join us today for our Leadership Lab series, where we're talking about merit and patronage practices across the world. Thank you so much for your time and for being with us. And we're so looking forward to hear from your exciting methodology, how you have done that, and yes, what are your findings? I'll give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will share my screen. So can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Professor Abia Sarah, for inviting me to this guest lecture. It's a great pleasure to give this presentation to you. And the topic of my presentation is politicization of bureaucracy. And I would like to present both some theoretical considerations and empirical findings from a study I've conducted together with my colleague Stephanie Fedder. And this study is based on career data, which is why the title is Empirical Findings, or the subtitle is Empirical Findings from Career Prosopography. So this is the structure of my presentation. I will start with the main topic, politicization of bureaucracy, give some information on the concept or concepts in the literature, on causes and consequences. Then I will move on to my empirical case, which is... So I will move on to my empirical case, give you some background information on Germany. Afterwards, I will present my study, which is about two different types of political experience that top civil servants in Germany bring to office. One is called front stage political experience, and the other one is called backstage political experience. And in the end, I will present some conclusions from my research. So political administrative relations are a core topic in public administration research. I think most of you have heard about both Max Weber and Woodrow Wilson. Max Weber has done a lot of research on the European context. Woodrow Wilson is more prominent in the US context, but both of them describe the relation between politics and administration as a separated one. So in the literature, you often find the term separation model or decisionist concept. So they argue that politics and administration, or politicians and bureaucrats, have different roles, different tasks, and are clearly separated also in terms of their careers. So this separation model is quite popular also nowadays, because it is anchored in many constitutions, for example, and this is also connected to the meritocratic principle of the selection of civil servants. But I would also like to mention that already Max Weber pointed out that this does not mean that bureaucrats don't have any political power, because he wrote much about the bureaucratic expertise as a source of political power. Later on in public administration research, there was a lot of empirical research on the relation between politicians and bureaucrats. A very prominent study was the Comparative Elite Study, CES, conducted by Aberbach, Putnam, and Rockman in the 1970s. And they conducted interviews with both politicians and bureaucrats in 7 Western democracies. And they found for all cases that bureaucrats in ministries have an important role in policymaking, though the separation model or the decisionist concept couldn't be confirmed by this empirical research. There has also been a lot of survey-based research on role conceptions of bureaucrats and politicians, and most of this research also finds at least partly overlapping roles between politicians and bureaucrats, in particular senior bureaucrats or top bureaucrats. For example, Alford, he described politics and administration as a blurred area, or said there is a blurred area in which there's a degree of indeterminacy about the roles and relationships between the two domains. So this leads us to research on politicization of bureaucracy, which is, I would say, a quite popular research topic in public administration scholarship today. If you look at the literature, you can see that there are many definitions of politicization of bureaucracy in this literature. And also there are a lot of different concepts. For example, the concept of formal politicization, party politicization, functional politicization, bounded politicization, and many more. A formal politicization, for example, refers to the legal framework. So you can ask, are civil servants allowed to be party members? Can they run for party offices and parliamentary seats? Are there formally politicized positions within the civil servants? And in Germany, in my country, all kinds of party political activities of civil servants are tolerated. So only if civil servants have achieved a parliamentary mandate at federal or state level, they have to go on leave from their civil service position until the next election. This is the only exception. Otherwise, they can even be heads of a political party in addition to their civil service position. So this is quite different from, for example, the UK or some other countries. Party politicization, on the other hand, is defined as the influence of political parties on recruitment and promotion in the civil service, and is usually measured by the number of civil servants who are replaced after government changes, but also by the number of political appointees, or even by the share of party members in the civil service. And in Germany, there are mixed results on the, for example, on the share of party members in the civil service. I will show you some numbers on this later in the presentation. Then we have the concept of functional politicization, and a functionally politicized bureaucrat does see himself or herself as does not see himself or herself as a mere expert who executes or perhaps advises political decisions, but understands and explicitly likes the eminent political role of administrators in the policy process. So functional politicization is usually much higher in ministries than in agencies, and there are also differences across states. It can be defined as sensitivity to the political aspects of the job and to the political preconditions of a successful promotion of policy initiatives. And this concept has been developed both by Robert Putnam and by Renate Mainz and Hans Ulrich Lerlin in the 1970s and 1980s. And finally, we have bounded politicization as another example. And bounded politicization refers to the recruitment of top officials, predominantly among career officials. This is a concept developed by Jan-Henrik Meyer-Saling. And we also have this quite popular definition of politicization by Guy Peters and John Bier, who define politicization as the substitution of political criteria by merit-based criteria in the selection and promotion of civil servants. And I will come back to this definition later in my presentation. So politicization of bureaucracy can have many different causes. One driver of politicization can be an increasing bureaucratic influence on policy making. So when bureaucrats increase their influence on policy making, then politicians try to increase their control on the bureaucracy, and this is also called politicization. So it's a reaction to the increasing influence of bureaucrats. This is one interpretation. There are other causes discussed in the literature, like, for example, characteristics of governments or parties. So the ideological orientation of the government parties or the president has been discussed as a cause of politicization. For example, some scholars argue that more conservative governments or more conservative presidents are more likely to politicize the bureaucracy than more left or social democratic parties or presidents. Another explanation would be time in office. So the longer you are in office, the more time you have to politicize the bureaucracy. And a third possible explanation would be the strength of the parliamentary basis of government parties, which could have an influence on the extent of politicization of bureaucracy. Also, political culture plays a role, and in the context of democratic backsliding, the politicization of bureaucracy is a quite widespread strategy. So there are a lot of different explanations for an increase in the politicization of bureaucracy. But as Dahlström and Niklasen have pointed out, most of these explanations have rarely been tested in a systematic way. The next question would be, is politicization a problem, or is it not a problem? Because if you look at the topic, then it's more or less consensus in the literature that almost all, or all, I would say all, civil service systems have some level of political involvement in personnel matters that is considered appropriate. Because for bureaucracies, especially for ministries or ministerial departments, it is very important to act in a politically responsive way to the government. So politicization helps to ensure political responsiveness of bureaucracy. But of course, politicization also entails several risks. The main concern is that the merit principle will be substituted by other criteria, political criteria, which will lead to lower professional standards in the bureaucracy or a loss in bureaucratic efficiency. And it would also lead to politicized administrative decision-making and inconfidence in the fairness of government institutions, and in the end, in limited accountability and thus a loss in legitimacy. There are, as I said, many different concepts of politicization in the literature, but if you look at the discussion, two dimensions are particularly important. The first is politicization as a change in the criteria applied for the selection and deselection of civil servants. And the second is politicization as behavioral aspect. So, for example, politically biased policy advice by civil servants. And my research, the research I want to present today, is focusing on the first dimension, so on politicization as a change in the criteria applied for the selection and deselection of civil servants. To be more precise, I will focus on the question to which extent is an increase in the relevance of political criteria in the selection of civil servants empirically observable. This is just one out of 4 possibilities to ask a research question because within the first dimension of politicization, studies can focus either on the formal side, on formal regulations, or on de facto criteria applied. And politicization can also be defined in a more narrow or in a broader understanding. The narrow understanding would be substitution. So merit-based criteria are substituted by political criteria. And the broader understanding would be a supplement. So political criteria supplement merit-based criteria to an observable extent. Well, then you would ask to which extent is there an increase in the relevance of political criteria for the selection or deselection of civil servants, either in formal regulations or empirically. And I focus on the de facto level, so on the question to which extent is such an increase in the relevance of political criteria empirically observable. Before I present the findings from my study, I would like to give you some background information on Germany, as I think not all of you are so familiar with the German system. So Germany is a parliamentary democracy, and we have mostly coalition governments in Germany. So it's mostly coalition governments of two, in more recent times, also 3 political parties. And the federal chancellor is the head of government. And he is also the head of the cabinet. The cabinet consists of the chancellor and all federal ministers. And all important political decisions in Germany are made by the cabinet. So it's collective decisions. Despite this fact, single ministers in Germany have a rather strong position because we have a very strong departmental principle in Germany, which is anchored in our constitution, the Grundgesetz. What you can see on the next slide is just the structure of the German state. We have a federal state. So we have the federal government and federal administration at the highest level, and this is the level I will focus on today. So I focus on the central government level. In addition to the federal administration, we also have altogether 16 state administrations. We have 13 large states and 3 so-called city states, Hamburg, Bremen, and Berlin. And of course, we also have a local level of government consisting of counties, county cities, and local governments. So as I will focus on the federal administration in my study, I will give you some more information on this level of government. So the main tasks of the federal administration are in policy formulation and lawmaking. So in federal ministries, bureaucrats working in federal ministries are mostly concerned with the preparation of policy drafts and in particular draft laws, because policy making in Germany is mostly lawmaking. And policy implementation is done by the states and local authorities. So this is a rather clear division of labor. So policy formulation, lawmaking takes place at the federal level, and policy implementation is done by the 2 other levels of administration. And we only have a very limited number of implementation tasks, which are performed by the federal administration. In our system, Länder and our states and local governments have a rather strong autonomy. So the federal administration supervises the states and local governments in the implementation tasks, but only in a legal manner, not in a substantial manner. So the civil service in Germany, and this is also true for the federal civil service, follows a Weberian tradition. So we have a highly regulated and legalistic system with many meritocratic procedures of recruitment and promotion for almost all civil service positions. In a civil service, just for your information, we have two different groups of employees: civil servants, on the one hand, Beamte and public employees. And the top positions, on the higher civil service positions I will talk about today, are usually Beamten positions, so civil service positions. And the difference from the other positions is that both remuneration and employment conditions for these positions are regulated by law and not by collective agreements of unions and employer associations. So this is the structure of the civil service in Germany, and we have four different categories which are associated with different education requirements. And for entering the higher civil service in Germany, you have to you need a university degree, and these higher civil service positions are around 16% of all civil service positions in Germany. And within this group of the higher civil service, you also have a very small group of top positions. And these top positions are filled with so-called political civil servants. So political civil servants in Germany are or function as a transmission belt between the political level, let's see, say the minister in the ministry, and the career civil service. And this institution, the institution of political civil servants, has a very long tradition in Germany. It was introduced in Prussia about 200 years ago, and has not been changed since then, actually. And political civil servants are hired and fired at the discretion of the minister. This is the main difference from career civil servants. And when they are fired, they are not really fired as in the private economy, but they are sent to temporary retirement by the minister. And temporary retirement means they are sent home with full salary and there's no demotion. Most political civil servants are recruited at the age of 50 years plus and from the group of higher civil servants. So we have very few external recruitments in the very top civil service positions in Germany. And also the total number of political civil servants is rather small. So it's about 170 individuals in federal ministry, or 170 positions in federal ministries, plus some selected other positions. So this also means that in federal agencies, we don't have any political civil servants. There are a few exceptions, but as a rule, agency heads are no political civil servants, but ordinary career civil servants from the higher civil service. And on a side note, early termination of such top positions in federal agency is in Germany almost not possible. So in cases of poor performance, it can be quite difficult. So one has to find a tailor-made solution, but nevertheless, it works quite well because we have a strong merit principle in recruitment and promotion. So without merit, you cannot achieve these positions. So this is an organizational chart of a federal ministry in Germany. So you have the minister at the top, who is a politician and a member of parliament. And you have up to 2 parliamentary state secretaries, which are kind of junior ministers, but they don't have a very important position within the ministry. Much more important are the state secretaries, and the state secretaries are the highest civil servants, so the top civil servants, and they are political civil servants. And also directors general are political civil servants. Well, they are the level 2 and level 1 positions in federal ministries are filled with political civil servants in Germany. All other positions or lower positions are filled with career civil servants. So this was all for the background in Germany. So let's now move on to the empirical study on politicization of bureaucracy, which I conducted together with my former colleague, Stefanie Fedder. So our study has two main contributions in my view. One is more conceptual and methodological, and the other one is empirical. So the starting point of our research was the challenge of how to measure politicization, because there are different established approaches to measure politicization in the literature. One established approach, for example, is to measure politicization as the share of party members in top civil service positions or in higher civil service positions. And here the problem is that this share is often unknown because it's considered a private matter. Also, survey data might be unreliable in some cultural contexts, including Germany, as I will show later. And in addition, it's hard to cover longer periods of time with this approach because party membership is often not documented in or is not everywhere documented in personnel files or in available biographical material. So I think party membership is, at least for my country, it's no suitable way to investigate politicization. Another possibility would be to explore the turnover rate. So the share of replacements in top civil service positions, for example, after a change in government. And here, I would say the main problem is that it is hard, if not impossible, to distinguish politicization from personalization. So you don't know, is it politicization or is it personalization or a question of personal trust when a replacement takes place? So I would say these disadvantages of the established approaches of measuring politicization have led to an increasing strand or an increasingly popular approach in politicization research, which I would call the career-based approach. You could also call it biographical politicization. So then you try to explore politicization based on career data, and this is also what I have done in my research. In my opinion, this approach is particularly useful to cover longer periods of time and also to uncover change developments in politicization in more detail. So I would argue that if you look at career data, you can use different career positions as a proxy for politicization. And in our paper, we use professional political experiences associated with different career positions as a proxy for politicization. So the main focus of our research is on political experience, which is a proxy for politicization. So we ask, in how far has an individual collected political experience before, professional political experience, before being appointed to a top civil service position. In my research, I distinguished two main types of professional political experience. with 2 subtypes for each main type. The first main type is front stage political experience. So front stage political experience is collected by being a politician. So if an individual has been a full-time politician, member of parliament, for example, at state, national, or EU level, then we would say that this is front stage political experience subtype A. And another subtype would be subtype B. And subtype B refers to political experience at local level. So if an individual has been working as politician at local level, then we argue that this would be front stage political experience subtype B. I will show you the differences between the subtypes on the next slide. The other main type is backstage political experience. So this is political experience collected by, not by being a politician, but by working for politicians or political parties. And again, we distinguish 2 subtypes. Subtype A would be working experience as staff of political parties, parliamentary groups, or members of parliament. And subtype B would be working in positions in ministries close to the political sphere. So this would be positions as political or ministerial advisors in government departments, or positions as personal assistants to the minister, for example, or head of the ministerial office. So on the next slide, you can see how we differentiate or distinguish these different subtypes of political experiences in terms of competencies. So our approach, as I said, is to identify different career positions where future top civil servants are likely to have acquired political craft. Political craft is a concept developed by Klaus Goetz, and he defines it as the ability to assess the likely political implications and ramifications of policy proposals, to anticipate and, where necessary, to influence and even manipulate the reactions of other actors in the policymaking process, and to design processes that maximize the chances of the realization of ministers' substantive objectives, policy objectives. So political craft comprises not only the ability to act in a functionally politicized manner, but also the willingness and ability to play an active part in the political process. And we argue that political craft encompasses various elements, including loyalty, advisory skills, political expertise, and bureaucratic expertise. And this is what you can see in this table on the slide. So political loyalty is also associated with all positions, both with the FPE positions and the BPE positions. The ability to anticipate the minister's advisory demands is definitely associated with the BPE positions, but not necessarily with the FPE positions. The ability to navigate the political sphere is associated with both types of BPE positions and with the FPE positions subtype A, but not with subtype B. And the ability to navigate the bureaucratic sphere is only associated with BPE-B positions. So with positions in ministries as ministerial advisor or as personal assistant to the minister. So from this perspective, BPE-B is in a way most comprehensive and possibly most useful for the minister. And this is also one of the bases for our hypothesis. So the hypothesis have been developed for the case of Germany. And for the question how relevant these different types of previous political experience are for top civil service positions in Germany over a period of more than 70 years. So the question is, how has the relevance of these different types of political experience developed over time? Our first hypothesis, or our first two hypotheses, argue that the likelihood of appointing top civil servants with front stage political experience of both subtypes remains unchanged over time. And here the main argument is that, as you could see on the previous slide, front stage political experience is in a way less useful from a functional perspective for the job as top civil servants than backstage political experience. So this would be the first argument. And the second argument would be that favoring front stage political experience is a very visible and straightforward form of politicization. And this way of politicizing the civil servants is considered to clash with the established administrative culture and the separation model, which is anchored in the German constitution. So these are the two main arguments why we would say or expect to see no change in the relevance of front stage political experience in Germany over time. This is different for backstage political experience. We would argue that the likelihood of appointing top civil servants with backstage political experience increases over time, again for both subtypes. And we would also argue that over time there is a higher increase in the likelihood of appointing top civil servants with BPEB than with BPEA, because we, as I said on the previous slide, we would argue that a backstage political experience of subtype B is just a little bit even more useful for the minister. So, and backstage political experience is also more compatible with the established system in Germany. So let's now have a look at the data. As I said in the beginning, we did a study based on career data, and we did a very comprehensive data collection based on biographical data. So we collected data from many different sources. We went to the Federal Archive and to other archives. We collected data from the handbooks of the federal government. We analyzed media coverage, official websites, and so on. And analyzed based on these different sources the biographical data of more than 1,500 top civil servants in Germany, level 1 and level 2 civil servants, as you could see on the organizational chart earlier in the presentation. The time period we covered were from 1949, this is the founding year of the Federal Republic of Germany, to 2017. And in our analysis, we have several dependent variables for the hypothesis. It's always a political experience, but we have different hypotheses for the different subtypes of political experience. Our independent variable is because we are interested in developments over time. We took the legislative periods of the German parliament as the independent variable. So in this during this time period from 1949 to 2017, we have altogether 18 legislative periods, and each legislative period is 4 years long. And we also included several control variables in our analysis. So let's now have a look at the findings. We start with our descriptive results. What you can see on this slide is the share of top civil servants with previous experience as politicians. So this is front stage political experience of both subtypes. And on the slide, this is compared to the total share of civil servants with political experience. This is PE. And also compared to the share of party members. This is PM on the slide. And you see the legislative periods on the x-axis. So what you can see is that the share of top civil servants with front stage political experience is constantly rather low in Germany. It is always less than, or has always been less than 10%. And in the last years, it has even been decreasing from this low level. So the first two hypotheses, assuming continuity in regard to front stage political experience of both subtypes, they are maybe not clearly confirmed by descriptive analysis, because there is a decreasing trend in the last legislative periods. We also have a similar descriptive figure for backstage political experience. And here you see a completely different picture. You can see that backstage political experience is quite widespread in Germany, and that backstage experience subtype B is even more widespread than backstage political experience subtype A. I would say this is not so surprising because subtype B is even more compatible with the German system and German administrative culture. So this descriptive analysis underlines the high and increasing relevance of backstage political experience for top civil service positions in Germany. And this conforms with our second hypothesis, hypothesis 2A and hypothesis 2B. But of course, we will have a closer look with other methods of data analysis. On a side note, you can also see the share of the development of the share of party members on this slide. And as I said before, I think party membership is not very reliable. So you can see on this slide that party membership is lower. The share of party members is lower than the share of top civil servants with previous job experience in backstage political positions. And against the background that those positions are usually associated with a party membership, you can see that the data on party membership is not very reliable. So this confirms how problematic this indicator is, at least in the German context. So let's move on to the next slide. What you can see here is mean predicted probabilities per legislative period. And this confirms in a way what you could see on the previous slides. So the predicted probability decreases from legislative period to legislative period for front stage political experience subtype A. It remains rather stable for front stage political experience subtype B. It increases remarkably for backstage political experience subtype A. And it also increases for backstage political experience subtype B. And this increase in the predicted probability seems to be exponential for backstage political experience subtype A and more continuous for backstage political experience subtype B. So in the next step, we calculated logit models with odd ratios. And this revealed, as you can see on the slide, I will not go into details here. This reveals a significant coefficients for time or legislative period on 3 subtypes of political experience. So our first hypothesis is confirmed by this analysis, as there is a significant coefficient which shows that legislative period lowers the likelihood that top civil servants have acquired front stage political experience subtype A earlier in their career. Well, the first hypothesis is not confirmed. The second hypothesis is confirmed, so there is no effect. This was the hypothesis. The third hypothesis, hypothesis 2A, is also confirmed, and the last hypothesis, 2B, is also confirmed. So with each legislative period, the likelihood that top civil servants have acquired backstage political experience earlier in their career increases. It increases about 20% compared to the legislative period before for subtype BPEA, and it increases about 10% compared to the legislative period before for subtype BPEB. So the hypothesis 2C, anticipating a higher increase in the importance of subtype BPEB than of subtype BPEA over time, is not confirmed by our analysis, as the odd ratios, as you can see here on the slide, is higher for BPEA than for BPEB. I also have this in text on this slide. So as you can see here, the first and the last hypothesis are not confirmed, and the three hypotheses in the middle are confirmed. So the likelihood of appointing top civil servants with front stage political experience, subtype B, remains unchanged over time. The likelihood of appointing top civil servants with backstage political experience, subtype A, and with backstage political experience, subtype B, increases over time. So this leads me to my conclusion. First, I think the measurement of politicization is extremely important for the findings. So as you maybe have seen in my presentation, is that dependent on the operationalization or the indicators used, one can prove both increasing, decreasing, or constant politicization in Germany. So measurement is extremely important, and it is also so extremely important to think about the what is behind the different measurements, which I try to do in this table, where I showed you the relation between different kinds of competences or elements of political craft and the different subtypes of political experience. What you could also see in my presentation is that party membership is no reliable indicator, at least for the German context. And one very strong empirical result is that the increase in backstage political experience is very strong in Germany. So backstage political experience of top civil servants today is the rule. So we have, when you look at this indicator, a very strong increase in politicization in the German ministerial bureaucracy. What is also an interesting side result, I didn't go into the details with regard to the control variables, but one of the control variables was change in government, and there was no effect. So the development of politicization is not dependent, or the extent of politicization is not dependent on the type of government change or election results. So it doesn't matter if you have a complete change in government parties, a partly change in the government coalition, so one party changes and one party stays in the coalition, or if you have no change in government parties. For politicization in Germany, this doesn't play any role. And a last comment from my side would be that I think, also again referring to the control variables, that one avenue for future research would be to explore gender differences in politicization, because if you look at the findings for the control variables, gender plays a role for backstage political experience. So there was a significant effect of gender on backstage political experience, and I think future research could explore this in more detail. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And I would be very curious to learn a little bit about political administrative relations in Pakistan. So how is it in your country? Would you say you can observe similar developments, or is it completely different? That would be quite interesting for me to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sylvia. It's like, it's fascinating to see how many differences there are across countries. Like, and then again, so many similarities as well. But with the German context, I could actually see more differences compared to the similarities. I would let the audience ask questions if there are any, and then I might reflect slightly on how it works in Pakistan and what kind of difficulties we have been facing, because I'm collecting similar kind of data on the biographies of the civil servants, especially the categorization. So I might ask if there are any questions with the audience. Let me check. Okay. There is a question. Wait, let me try to read it. Okay. I think it's in the chat. Yes. Okay, maybe I can read it. Considering the evolution of EU I mean, I don't know. This is I don't think it's very relevant. Okay, do we have any other question? So it should be fine. I think I would pop up with the few comments that I had in my mind. So one of the key questions that I was trying to figure, maybe I can answer the concept that you initiated in the beginning. So in Pakistan, we don't really have the civil servants who would claim that they have political background, because we have been struggling since a lot with the data to ever find out that, okay, although we know that there are a set of civil servants who are more closely linked to one party, and then there is another set of civil servants who is more politically loyal to another political party, but then it is not supposed to be very vocal, I would say, and then civil servants are not supposed to show it, and not many would really know that, okay, this group is particularly aligned until you are part of that group, or until you closely know them. So they try to stay apolitical in front of the citizens mainly. So we have been like struggling a lot when I was collecting this data and I was trying to study the political affiliation. There was no way we could find this data. So at the end of the day, what we figured out was that the only way to study politicization was to mainly look at the changes with the change in government, the term change in the term. So I would say tenure of the civil servant. For example, someone was supposed to spend like 3 years in the office, and they were like sent away after 2 months, 3 months, say 1 year, and they were not allowed to complete their term in the office. You said that in Germany it doesn't matter, but with the change in government in Pakistan, like with the data that we have, it's massive. Like there's a lot of change, and there's very fascinating trends that in some political terms there's a lot of fluctuation, and then when the other party comes, especially the first thing they usually do, it sounds like very American, but it's not. It's not what happens in Pakistan, but it kind of happens like that, because in US it's very obvious that someone comes and then they bring their own set of bureaucrats. It's not like that in Pakistan, but also when they come, they try to like reshuffle a lot. So people are moved from one office to another office to another office, to ensure that maybe, okay, this is the group of bureaucrats we want to work closely, depends on the organizations. So, I mean, I think it's very tricky to study politicization and political affiliation, I would say mainly. For example, when you studied front stage and backstage, I was wondering how could you ever figure that out in Pakistan? It's tricky with the data. And I'm also wondering that gender could be like a very interesting variable, because when we are studying the tenure of the civil servants, we're actually seeing that with the career civil servants, males have more fluctuation and the females have rather less. You can't say that they don't have, but there are less fluctuations when we look at the female side, but it has to be explored more. Also, I had one more question. With the concept that you used, there are career civil servants and there are politicized civil servants. I was just wondering, is it more like the NPM type technocrats that are hired from outside career civil service to be appointed at the top positions, or is it something else? For example, they're not coming from the exam system, the way the bureaucrats are hired, or how would you categorize that maybe?
So the top civil servants in Germany, the political civil servants, are usually hired from the lower ranks of the civil service. So they are hired from the career civil servants. So this is what Jan-Hinrich Meyer-Saling would describe as bounded politicization. So they are from the pool of candidates from within the civil servant. So there are very few external recruitments, but I must say my data end 2017, and I've started to collect new data for the previous 7 years, and my impression is that this is changing. So we have now we have more external recruitments, and the external recruitments are often more politicized recruitments. So not the technocrats and PM type, but more politicized ones.
So when you want to appoint someone at the top position, like you bring someone and you place them, it's more like that.
Yeah.
Professor Jan is going to talk to us next week as well. So
okay, yeah.
I'm pretty excited with that. Okay,
Sounds
so
great. Yeah.
question. Maybe I can read that out. So we are also talking about the fact that a political responsiveness in civil service servants is not inherently bad, but it can become problematic if it compromises their impartiality or commitment to serving the public interest. How can civil servants balance political responsiveness with impartiality to ensure that their alignment with elected officials does not compromise public trust or democratic integrity? That's one of the.
Okay, I completely agree. So this is the main challenge. So you nail it in a way. So you need political responsiveness. This is why the decisionist concept or the separation model is a little bit unrealistic. So because you need this political element in a way in the ministerial bureaucracy. So you need some political responsiveness, but you also need the bureaucratic standards and the bureaucratic norms like legality, truthfulness, and so on. And I would say the German way is that you have this institution of political civil servants on the one hand, and this bounded politicization, like recruiting the highest positions from within the civil service. And within the civil service, we have a very strong meritocratic system. So they are socialized within the system, and they, in this process of professional socialization, they learn how to act as professional bureaucrats. And I think this is the balance in Germany. This is by no means perfect, but this is just the way it has developed in our country, and it works more or less well. At least there are not so many scandals on this topic, and there is not so much like media attention and public discussion or a quest for reform also. So it's quite accepted in a way, this balance we have found. Yeah.
Okay, but probably you have found a balance. We're still struggling with that because I think we rather look at it in a very negative way. But the more you read from different countries, you tend to realize that, okay, it's not essentially bad. They also need to be politically responsible, but they need to understand that they're serving the public, not a certain political party. We have another point from another student. Is saying that the real world roles are more fluid than simply classifying in policy or administrative civil servants, at least. In Pakistan, they are more fluid. Like, I think he's talking about the two concepts that you gave earlier that I was also curious about. So career civil servant and the other group that probably you call them policy or politicized civil servants.
Yeah,
PCS.
political civil servants and career civil servants. I would say this is are two formal categories of civil servants. So it's a different legal basis in a way. They act on a different legal basis, and this question is maybe more about roles. So, and I think investigating roles with career data is maybe not the best way. So it's better to do interviews or ethnographic research or surveys if you are interested in roles. And I completely agree with you that the roles are fluid and usually also dependent on different situations. So usually bureaucrats are able to fulfill different roles dependent on the situation. So, and the main challenge here is maybe that bureaucrats shouldn't fulfill a too active political role. So they can be politically responsive, but if they become too active, then it is challenging to maintain the professional standards of a bureaucrat. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. He's asking that how do the public administration literature looks at those career civil servants who in specific political terms get key positions because they are very politically aligned with certain parties? How the literature looks at them? Those bureaucrats who get the key positions because they are very politically aligned with a certain political party.
Also my impression is generally politicization is a development that can be observed in many countries nowadays over the last, let's say, 40, 50 years or so. And in the literature, of course, it is discussed critically, and it has to be discussed critically. And at the moment, it shows that in some countries, I think Jan-Hendrik Meyer-Salling will tell you a lot about this, how it is in Hungary, for example. So in Hungary, it's highly problematic. So because the politicization is extremely high and there's an extremely high turnover. And there is really a substitution. So merit-based criteria are substituted by political criteria. And this leads to a very high political control of the administration. And in process of democratic backsliding, this can be really problematic because the public administration is not able anymore to act like as an institution helping to secure the democratic system. So, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Do we have any other point left from the audience? I think we're good to go. Thank you so much, Professor Sylvia, for being with us and for reflecting on the German experience and the politicization. And I think it's really interesting to see how many differences and similarities and how much there is to learn from the other countries.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us and giving your time.
And thank you so much for giving me some information on how it is in Pakistan. It was very interesting. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for coming and for asking questions. Yeah, and have a nice evening.
You too, have a nice evening.
Goodbye.
Bye.